Hi, welcome back to the Lil Will Learning Company. And in today's video, we're going to go over a framework for reading comprehension. Now, reading comprehension is one of those things where you hear it and it sounds like it's just one thing, but in truthfulness, it's a combination of skills that happen to basically determine whether or not when a student reads something, do they actually understand it? Now, it comes in these different ways. Usually, when we gauge a student's comprehension, we gauge it after the reading is done, but there's things you do beforehand to build it, then you kind of reinforce it during the reading, and then you try to make sure it's as solid as possible after the reading. So there's before, during, and after parts of the reading comprehension, and we're going to look through that whole framework right now in this video. Now, before a student ever even opens the book, there's a way to support comprehension and build it beforehand. So what we're talking about is this, that like three specific tools that anyone from parents to teachers can use to support reading comprehension. So the first is kind of like a preview. Say, hey, okay, we're going to read this book here, this part here. When you're reading a book with a child, it's perfectly okay. You don't want to ruin it for them. You want them to experience the book, but just to preview beforehand, we're going to go over this part of the book. You're going to see maybe a few things here or there without ruining it, but just previewing it, giving them a purpose behind what they're reading does help a lot. Going over the titles, the headings, the length of it, perhaps even just here are some of the themes we might be exploring or looking at within this reading as well. Vocabulary is really important before reading because there's going to be words that when you read something with students or when you read with your children, there's going to be words they don't know. And depending on how complex a book you've chosen, you could try to go over every single word. You can try to go over the ones you feel like will have the biggest impact. I would say there's no real wrong way to go about it. It's a matter of feel. If you're like, hey, these 5 words are enough for now, that's fine. If you feel like we got to go over every single one, I just want to remind you just to keep them in bite-sized chunks. There is such a thing as like too much information all at once, but vocabulary is a really important one before you start reading. If they have a good idea of what the words mean, when they get to that part of what they're reading and they already have an understanding of the meaning of the word, it helps tremendously in the comprehension of everything else, just because it takes that mental load off from them so they have more understanding and less confusion as they're reading, basically. Now, if you can just preview ahead of time and go over vocabulary, that eliminates a lot of problems that come up with comprehension. Now, during reading, there are another 3 tools that are very, very useful. The problem that often happens during reading is that this is a time where maybe parents or teachers, adults in general, they disappear. But if you really want your children or students to really become much better readers, you have to kind of be there guiding them along. I know there's nothing wrong with like silent reading, but the truth is when you read with your child, when you read with your students, you can kind of guide them along during reading to do a few things really, really well. Okay, so number 1, plan out your pauses so that you can stop to ask questions, to I used to always say to digest what they've just read, but when you pause, you give them a chance to think back of whatever they've just read, ask them some questions to kind of guide their thinking a little bit, but those are really important. If you're just speed running through, not to borrow a video game term, but if you're just speed running through, you don't give them a chance to think, to digest, and so you want to ask them those questions. You want to see where their thinking is at, because reading is also thinking as well. Then you can also model a think aloud, like, all right, I'm kind of confused here. Let's go back and reread that section. What you're kind of modeling to them is you're modeling that while reading, you should also be thinking. And it's perfectly fine to go back and reread a section for better clarity or just to kind of go over it again, have it cement in their heads, or perhaps you were just confused to begin with and didn't make sense. So never feel bad about going back and rereading a section. And then just have them verbally then, this is the 3rd one, verbally retell what's going on. It's like, all right, so tell me what's happened here. What's going on? Because depending on what book you're reading, sometimes the information is not explicitly told to you. Sometimes it's beneath the text and you're supposed to kind of figure it out as a reader. Now, it's fun as a reader to try to figure all that out. And so just stopping and going, hey, what just happened here? But as you can see, the tools during reading, they really help if they're teacher guided or adult guided. Now, if the students are reading by themselves, you can have them, let's say, just pause themselves, ask questions themselves. They could just pause and think out loud and try to reread a section. That's perfectly fine too. But if it's an adult guiding it first and modeling it first, then they're more likely to do it on their own when they're reading on their own. Now, the last phase is what to do after the reading is done. So let's say the goal for the day was just to read that chapter. Chapter's read. You've already done the work before reading the chapter. You've done the work during reading of pausing and asking questions and all that. So what to do afterward? Now, there are many tools out there. You can buy them on Amazon. I've used them as a teacher. They're like these teacher guides or student workbook guides. And some teachers like them. Some teachers don't. And I'll be honest, I liked them. My time is limited as a teacher and as an educator. It's limited now as a business owner. And so it's nice that those tools are out there and they're really affordable and they're good. And they ask a lot of questions of cause and effect or how to kind of group characters together. They're really high level thinking. But if you don't have those, if it's just you and your kid or just you and some students and you don't have these workbooks, here are three things you can do after reading. So number one, just you can have them retell the reading itself, but actually probably a better strategy is to have them summarized and to distinguish between the two. Retelling is just them telling you what happened, whether they write it out, whether they verbalize it. Writing is probably better. They tell you what happened, but to summarize, they have to explain what really mattered the most in that chapter. Because when we read, not everything is the most important thing. So if you have a student summarize it, they summarize what mattered the most. You can have discussion. So, what was it that really stuck out to you in that chapter? What frustrated you? What changed overall? Which character changed overall? That's good. Discussion's not always the best, but again, if you're limited in tools, it's still really useful. And then start with something short in writing, 5 to 6 sentences, kind of a reflection. It's not like a full-on essay. And what that does is it kind of cements what they read in their minds, which kind of helps the comprehension. And because they have to think back to what they read, that's again helping with the comprehension. So those are three tools you can use after the reading is done. So the last thing I want to point out is there's something particularly special about what I just talked about in this framework here. And of course, you're kind of welcome to put in different tools or strategies within that framework, but I think that framework is still pretty universal when it comes to reading comprehension. There are things you should do before you start reading with your students and children. There are things you should do during the actual reading with your students and children, and then things that you should be doing afterward. And whether or not you get those tools from, let's say, an Amazon teacher's guide or student workbook, or whether you think of them yourselves, they usually typically have that following. And I would say something that's pretty universal amongst all of it. Vocabulary work definitely before the reading and maybe just retouching upon it after reading. During the reading, pause, ask questions, ask for reflections, see if they're understanding the meaning underneath the text, not just what's explicitly told to them. And then for after the reading, again, just something to cement in their minds or where they can explain what they've just read, where they can explain it, summarize it. And that makes a huge difference. And that before, during, after helps a lot. And if this helped a lot, please like and subscribe and check us out, the Lil Will Learning Company, where we have mentorship, we have personalized curriculum, and we have books. So thanks once again, and we'll see you next time.